Okay, so this is the Bible study for Genesis chapter 38. And if you think reading the Bible is boring and nothing interesting ever happens, and you prefer to watch soap operas and daytime TV, which you probably shouldn't prefer, but I'm just saying you probably haven't read the whole Bible. Because this is an interesting story. So I'll just get right to it. Let's read. The text says, At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hira. There, Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. He married her and made love to her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, Sleep with your brother's wife, and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the child would not be his. So whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death also. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, Live as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah grows up, for he thought he may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's household. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. But when Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira the Adullamite went with him. When Tamar was told, Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes and covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance of Anaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that, though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, Come now, let me sleep with you. And what will you give me to sleep with you? She asked. I'll send you a young goat from my flock, he said. Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it? She asked. He said, What pledge should I give you? Your seal and its cord, and the staff in your hand, she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite in order to get his pledge back from the woman. But he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, Where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Anaim? There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here, they said. So he went back to Judah and said, I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said, There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here. Then Judah said, Let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant. Judah said, Bring her out and have her burned to death. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. I am pregnant by the man who owns these, she said. And she added, see if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are. Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah, and she didn't, and he did not sleep with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it to the wrist and said, this one came out first. But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out, and she said, so this is how you have broken out. And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was named Zerah. All right. Remember that you can download a PDF copy of this Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive so that you can follow along with us as we study this text. Number 1 says, what happened in last week's Bible study? A, Joseph had some dreams. Yes. B, Joseph was Dad's favorite. Yes. C, Joseph's brothers weren't too excited about it. Yes, that's true. And D, Joseph's brothers sold him to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. And all of those are true. And we have a lot to get through in this chapter. So I don't want to spend too much time on last week's study, especially since we're going to revisit the story of Joseph again starting next week. So we'll probably want to review that next week. So instead, we're just going to keep moving here. But all of that was a part of the story last week. Number 2, what is happening now according to 38, 1 through 5? So 38, 1 through 5 basically explains how Judah got to where he was and his sons. And it's really the setup for the rest of the story. So he moved to this one area to stay with a friend, Adullam, from Adullam, named Hira. That guy features in the story. He married a Canaanite, and maybe we should know that something's about to go wrong because of that, since all of his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather did not marry a Canaanite, and in fact made a big point of not marrying the Canaanites, but rather marrying somebody from their own lineage and family. So maybe this is where it all started to go wrong. I don't know. Seems reasonable. So she gave birth to 3 sons, it tells us, and that sets up the rest of the story, in case you remember Paul Harvey. So then what happened next, according to 38, 6 through 7? A, Judah got a wife for his firstborn. That's true. Er's wife was named Tamar. That's true. C, was wicked in the Lord's sight. That's what it tells us. And then D, so the Lord put him to death. So doesn't follow God. We could argue that he was probably following his father's example. I'll just say one of my questions is, why do all the sons keep being put to death, but Judah doesn't, given his situation? But there you go. Number 3, what happened next according to 36:8? So we're told that Judah told his son Onan to sleep with his brother's wife. This is pre-law. This is before the law of Moses, but I just want to say that it's significant that this would have been the thing that was in the law, that it was normal in the law of Moses later on, which we understand as the will of God for the people of God, at least of that time for sure. That it was normal for the brother to marry his brother's wife if she is widowed, in order and so then those children would be his brother's children and not his children. So that's a normal thing. Um, so um, there we go. Um, let's see. So Onan, um, so that's what happened. Is Judah told Onan to sleep with his brother's wife? The second part of number 3 says, "How did Onan respond?" According to 36:9, and A says Onan knew that the child would not be his, and then B, so whenever Onan slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. Um, I don't want to get into the weeds of this, but I would just say that part of, I think, the Catholic Church's understanding of um, of their stance on birth control has to do with actions like this, and people that for various reasons um, choose wickedly not to produce offspring. I would say that perhaps we could go back to, where they believe life begins and things like that. But there are certainly, um, I would say, so this is the earliest form of birth control, not 100% effective, just in case anybody was going to try it. Um, but it's the earliest form of birth control, and it often seems to happen with evil intent, wicked intent. And in this case, it's the selfish intent that if I produce this child's not going to be mine, so I don't want to produce a child with this woman, which is pretty rebellious of him. So, number 4, what does the text tell us about the Lord's view of this action according to 36:10? It says not that he loved it. It says not. It does not say that. It says it was wicked in his sight, and so the Lord put Onan to death also. So Onan also is selfish and wicked. We don't know what Er's sin was, what his wickedness was. We do now know at least part of the wickedness of Onan. Um, and then number 5 says, "What did Judah tell Tamar?" According to 36:11, he says, "My third son's too young. Go live as a widow in your father's household." So basically, go back. Women couldn't work. Women didn't have an inheritance. Women didn't. This is before inheritance in Israel, but women did not have the ability to support themselves. So they were either supported by their husband or by their father's household. So Judah sends her back to her father's household. Um, and so she lives there. Um, the second part of the question says, was he being honest about his intentions? So his intentions originally sounded upright. He's not old enough to marry, so go live in your father's household until he's old enough to marry, and then. But it tells us specifically that in Judah's head was the thought that um, that this son, my third son, my last son, um, might die too. So almost as if he thinks that she's the problem, like she's some kind of black widow or something. Um, that if I marry him to her, then he will also die, and I'll have no offspring. So he holds him back and does not follow what appears to be the custom. Even if the law didn't exist yet, it appears that this is already the custom. We don't have evidence yet that it was instituted by God amongst this family yet. But later on, when God gives Moses the law, it was certainly put in the law by God. So it's reasonable to assume that this part of the custom was at least affirmed by God, even if it wasn't instituted by God. So then Judah also is being selfish in not following the custom because he doesn't want to lose another son, and he's afraid that that's the outcome. So again, I think I said this at the beginning, why it is that everybody else is being put to death and Judah is not. I can't really answer that because Judah seems to be just as much in sin, and we're going to continue thinking about that or talking about how that goes here. So number 6 says, what happened after a long time, according to 38:12 through 13. So this is a big chunk of text. We're kind of summarizing this section of text. We find out, that Judah's wife died. So really now he's only got one offspring. Um, we don't know if he had other wives or other concubines or whatever, like his father did. It doesn't tell us that he did. So at this point, Judah has only one son to carry on his name. B. Judah went up to Timnah to the men who were shearing his sheep. Yes. C. When Tamar was told that her father-in-law was coming to Timnah, she put on a disguise and sat down at at the entrance to Enam on the road to Timnah, for she saw that though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as a wife. So she, um, we can get on her for her actions, which were dishonest and not upright for sure, and probably historically, many people would have, in a male-centric society, would have put the blame on her. Um, but also we understand that Judah has been the one that initiated the dishonesty here. That doesn't make so just because I initiate dishonesty, just because I does do something wrong, doesn't like make it okay for somebody else to do something wrong. But let's just sort of be even in our assessment here. D. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, so obviously he crossed on the other side of the road. He got as far away as possible, right? I mean, that's this. I think this verse was probably the most troublesome. Or if you've never read this text, this is not what you expected to happen. If you've ever met men, maybe it is what you expected to happen. I don't know. Um, but uh, but he thought she was a prostitute, so he went over to her and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." Um, so he's lost his wife. He's on a business trip. and he sees a prostitute, and this is what happens. Not what should happen, but it's what he does. She asked what he would give her as payment, and then what he would give her as a pledge until the payment came. So he's going to send her a sheep from his flock, but she's like, yeah, but what about until that comes? I need a pledge. And he says, well, what kind of pledge are we talking here? And she says, well, give me your seal, which is unique to you, um, and your cord and your staff. So these are things that he would have. They're his. They're unique to him. He would have kept them with him, and now he's going to be without them. So it's kind of like in modern days, you go to a restaurant and you're like, oh man, I don't have enough cash, and you only accept cash, which is rare but does happen occasionally. And they say, you say, I'm going to run to the ATM, and they're like, I don't think so. And you say, well, let me leave my ID here, or they might ask for your ID. So you leave your ID there because they know exactly who you are. And you need that for everything else you're going to do. So you're going to come back. And that was the kind of thing that happens here. Um, so then Judah gave her his seal and its cord and his staff. So he did that. And she became pregnant and then put her widow's clothes on again. So I'm not going to remain dressed like a prostitute. I'm going to go back and act like nothing ever happened, except for that she's pregnant. So something did happen. Then Judah's friend brought the goat, so the payment, and the prostitute was not there, and she apparently didn't exist. He asked around, where's the shrine prostitute? They're like, there's never been a shrine prostitute. So he gave up, and instead of running around asking where the prostitute was that he slept with, and sound like a fool because there was no prostitute. Who did you sleep with? How drunk did you get? That you slept with somebody and you can't even find her again? Are you sure it was a human being? I don't know. He's going to look foolish. He's going to look foolish running around asking for where the prostitute is because it's maybe a little innocuous. Wasn't there a shrine prostitute here? But no, I need to get the payment to the prostitute I slept with. So that's kind of embarrassing. Embarrassing. So he doesn't want to look like a fool, so he says, let's just drop it. She can keep it, whatever. So then what happened next, according to 38:24 through really through the end here? Judah received word that his daughter-in-law was guilty of prostitution and was pregnant. Oh, how could she? It doesn't seem to have crossed his mind what was going on here at this point. So he said, bring her out and have her burned to death. That's quite hypocritical. That was really something, that was his action. Even if he doesn't know that he's caught, even if he doesn't know that it was by him at that point, it was incredibly hypocritical for him to have slept with a prostitute, but when it's her, we're going to burn her to death. See, so she prepared herself for this. So Tamar sent Judah his items and told him that she was pregnant by the man who owned these things. See if you recognize them. See if you can find the man that slept with me. He owns these things. And Judah immediately knew who it was who had slept with her. And apparently at this point, she does not get burned at the stake, because Judah's response is, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her my son Shelah. So he recognizes that she has If she had said, "Hey, what the heck? Why aren't I'm supposed to be married to your son? He's grown up. I'm not married to your son. What's going on?" She's just a woman, and so she's not going to be listened to if she says this. But she's got his attention now, doesn't she? Um, and so he says, "Wow, I'm the one that caused all this." He admits it. He says, "She's more righteous than I. What what I should have done, I didn't do, which set up everything that led to this situation." And in case you wondered, he didn't sleep with her again, which seems like an odd addition. I guess perhaps it would have. Well, I mean, if we're talking about the law, even though the law did not yet exist, it does have the brothers are supposed to produce offspring with the widow of their brother, but it does not say the father-in-law then is in line. And in fact, there are Leviticus 18 um, prohibits those kind of familial relationships. Um, so, um, so he didn't go ahead and marry her. Um, he instead, both of them stayed separate. Apparently, she gave birth to twins under odd circumstances. In the odd circumstances, one twin started to come out, had his arm out. They tied the string around it. This is the firstborn. Then he pulls back in, and the other one comes out first. So the other one was technically born first, but um, so we have their names associated with one breaking out and the other one having the scarlet cord around his wrist. Um, and so then, the last question, hopefully, will bring this together. Number 8 says, "Well, just when you thought your family was messed up, where do we find the will of God in this story?" Thankfully, we do hear some in this story about what the will of God is. The wickedness of the first two brothers is proclaimed in God's action against them. So we do know that. Um, I think we can safely say that Judah was unrighteous and did wrong and was found out, was called out by his daughter in law in what he did, even though it doesn't say God put him to death. We find this situation um, where there's some justice that shows up. Um, so there's that. I think I think we can be clear that um, so a couple of things I want to say. First of all, a lot of people put biblical characters up on a pedestal. So because these biblical characters are on a pedestal, they can do no wrong, and therefore we have to somehow explain away the things that we read that seem clearly wrong to be able to say that they weren't wrong after all because of this, this, and this. And so a lot of our response is putting biblical characters up on a pedestal and justifying anything we read that might be on the edge um, somehow so that we can call them righteous. Now, the opposite response to that is when we occasionally then see somebody that we cannot justify their actions. And I think Judah in this passage is one that we just can't justify his actions. There's no way we can say, no, he's actually righteous, he's up on this pedestal, and instead we have to say, um, oh no, he's human, he's fallible, he's imperfect. And then what usually happens is the next statement is, he's imperfect just like us, which is true. And many of us have had life experiences that, particularly before, hopefully before we were following God, mirrored some of these things. We're pretty messed up, just like some of these things. Um, but we can't use that to justify that being ongoing. So what I think we can see in this text is that God's not okay with this. So we can say these characters are imperfect like me, but we can also say that God's not okay with it, and therefore we should not continue in this type of action. And that God takes action, that there is justice, that people are struck dead, um, that honestly, that this woman that in some ways was wronged was um, had had justice, for the way that she was wronged. Um, but here's a deeper thing that doesn't really show up in the text, but actually kind of shows up within what we might have ignored, which is the genealogy. And that is um, that when we read in Matthew the genealogy of Jesus, we find that Jesus, the beginning of the genealogy of Jesus, is Abraham, Isaac, Judah and Tamar, Jacob, Judah and Tamar, Perez. So this son, one of these two sons that was born to Tamar in the midst of this sin, became the ancestor of Jesus. And we actually find that in several places in the history, in the lineage of Jesus, where Jesus is, um, Jesus was descended from David and Bathsheba, for instance, um, and Solomon. David. Anyway, there's several spots in the lineage of Jesus where we find um, Rahab, um, Boaz and Ruth. Boaz and Ruth is not a story of unrighteousness, but it is a story of brokenness. Um, so when we read throughout Scripture and we read the genealogy of Jesus, we find a story of sinfulness. We find a story of brokenness, and we find God bringing something amazing, bringing the solution to our sin out of the midst of the brokenness and sinfulness of mankind. And I think that may be the most important thing. That, by the way, is a thing that you will ignore. You'll not just read that in this passage, you'll ignore it unless you look at the genealogy, which is why we kind of like to skip over the genealogy because that's the boring part of Scripture and read the story, who has sex with who, because that's the interesting part of the story, I guess. But I just want to throw out there that within the genealogy, within the boring parts, we find the grace and the glory and the power of God, um, and what He does through all of the sinfulness and brokenness of mankind, and the solution that He brings to that sinfulness and brokenness. So I'll leave you with that. This is where God is in the passage, and where is God in your story of sinfulness and brokenness? Is there redemption? Is there new life? Is there hope in the midst of it?